Welcome to another episode of the Embody Method podcast. Today I'm going to talk to you about mindset shifts, and this is a topic that I've been speaking about with my ladies who are in my Embody Strong group coaching program. 8 weeks, we're currently at week 3, so every Monday night we'll do a little webinar and it'll be on a different topic. I'll present that to them, and then at the end we can have a little chat about what the topic has been, or it can be about anything, and they can ask me questions, see how things are going, etc. And this one really resonated with them. It generated a lot of conversation, a lot of thought processes, a lot of things maybe they hadn't considered before, and that's the point of it. It's mindset shifts, so it's trying to think a little bit differently. And we're used to thinking a certain way and can sometimes get kind of stuck in our ways, maybe more of a fixed mindset. And this allows us to kind of talk openly about different thought processes and how to, maybe navigate things slightly differently. And the first one I talked about was expectation versus reality, because I think we put a lot of emphasis on things happening in a short time period. So what can I get within 6-8 weeks, and a real over expectation about what's going to happen in that time period. And I talked about Mel C because Sporty Spice, she was recently in the news quite a lot in the media because she had done a photo shoot and she was looking really good. She's I think she's 52, so there's lots of comments about looking great at 52, Sporty Spice, blah blah blah. And there was things alongside that like, look like Mel C in 6 weeks, or this is what she ate for breakfast, lunch and dinner, you can look like this too. An expectation that for your random person out there, for the next 6 weeks, if they did exactly what she did, they'd look like that. But Mel C, Sporty Spice, if you follow the Spice Girls, she's always been slender, she's always been sporty, hence her name, fit, active. So she's already got like an underlying muscle memory, maybe a good amount of lean muscle on her body. So for her to then start to work that, the results she sees are going to be much different to, Sandra, who's like brand new in the gym and is thinking that this is what's going to happen for her in 6 weeks. So we were talking about this in terms of what we, kind of the pressure we put on ourselves because we think more is going to be achieved in quite a short time frame, rather than thinking about, well, what can happen in a slightly longer time frame. And maybe that sort of 6-8 weeks when we feel a little bit disappointed if we've not got to where we expected to be, that might be when we just suddenly give up and like, well, what's the point? I've done 8 weeks. Whereas what if we reframe that and look past that, and we underestimate what can be achieved in a slightly longer time frame. But 2 months you might focus on having not achieved XYZ, but if you've switched it and thought, okay, I've done this in 2 months, what can I do in 4 months, 6 months, 8 months? And in those latter stages, like 6-8, that's when you'll really start to notice big changes. Maybe the big changes you thought were going to happen in a smaller time scale. And I think this is something that the women put a lot of pressure on themselves, but also it's because we're told and we're fed things like clickbait, like look like this in 6 weeks, or eat this for 6 weeks and you will look like this. And that adds to the pressure. And when it doesn't happen, even like a couple of ladies in Embody Strong, so we're only into week 3 now, and at the end of week 2 they weighed themselves on the scales and they hadn't seen a change, so they were really annoyed. They're like, I'm in a calorie deficit, I'm doing my walking, I'm not seeing a change yet. But you've only been doing it for 2 weeks. You're trying to undo and rechange behaviours, habits that you've had for the past 5, 10, 15 years. I think we expect a lot of ourselves, and fat loss is hard. Fat loss takes time. Strength building takes time. It's not going to happen within a week, even 2 weeks. And I think it would do everyone a load of good if that was more widely talked about, but it's not sexy and it's not clickbait to say, you're going to have to put the effort in and it's probably not going to happen in 8 weeks, because people want that quick sale, don't they? They want to say this is what you could get and make it seem like if you don't get it then it's actually your fault, rather than being a bit more open and honest. And all the other things that we don't see, like a picture of Mel C looking amazing and ripped in her little leotard. We don't know, like I said, she's obviously been active for quite a lot of her life. She's probably got PT multiple times a week, maybe has like a private chef. And then there'll also be genetic elements to how people look and how quickly someone can achieve fat loss and lose fat from certain areas of their body and things like that. So talk about that expectation versus reality, take the pressure off. And I used an analogy when I was talking about this, and it was about building a house. So if you decide you're going to build a house or you're going to move into a new build, you don't sign the paperwork and then expect to be within that house within 2 months, maybe even 2 years, because you've got to think about all those things that have to happen. You've got to dig it out, you've got to put the foundations in, you've got to do the cement, build bricks. This is when I don't know what building a house entails, but like insulate, put the roof on, windows. There's loads and loads of things that need to happen before it's ready to move in, before it's in that final kind of state. And that's how we need to see ourselves. We're building the habits, building those foundations that we can then build on and continue adding to as we move through life. And then keeping with the house analogy, thinking about when you do have your house, or if you buy an older property, you're not just moving in and expecting like you're never going to have to do anything in there. You're going to have to undertake repairs, maybe like touch up paint, replace tiles on the roof, maybe change the windows. There's always going to be bits of work that need done, and that's how we need to see ourselves. We're not going to suddenly be fixed or like can't stop trying. And sort of a kind of side note to that is when people are on a fat loss journey, they don't think about the after, like the maintenance. You might lose the fat and then it's like, okay, what now? But you don't just stop there and go back to everything else you did before, because that's just going to put you back to where you started. There will be a requirement to kind of maintain that. So that's why building those foundations and behaviours and habits and getting them really tight and easy to happen, stacking the habits and making sure it's something that you can stick to, even when life gets busy, etc., is what's going to see you through. So for me, when I talk about an 8-week program, it's an 8-week program. I'm not saying you can't get change in 8 weeks, absolutely not. If you do all the things that you're supposed to do, you're in a calorie deficit, you're moving, you're doing strength workouts, all that sort of stuff, there's bound to be some kind of change, of course. And that's evident already within the women that I'm speaking to. Maybe it's not quite a physical change yet, but it's all changing in the mind, which is super important. That mindset is shifting. They're realizing that their self-worth is, they're worthy, basically. They're prioritizing themselves. They're making time to exercise. They're feeling clearer in their head. They're feeling a bit more confident. They're realizing that they're not just mum, wife, teacher, whatever other employment you might be. You're actually a person who needs these things to be able to then give stuff back. So expectation versus reality was a really important one that we talked about. The other one which I talked about was another kind of phrase I'm really passionate about, which is the something better than nothing mindset. So rather than being all or nothing, thinking about doing something which is always going to be better than doing nothing at all. And there's been some really nice examples of this within Embody Strong and the ladies. Things like, we've got step targets just to kind of get the movement going. And instead of thinking, I'm not going to reach the step target, so I'm not going to try at all, they've been going out for a little evening walk, even if it's just short, just to get a little extra in, a little time for themselves, a little added movement for the day. Things like not hitting all the workouts, but doing most of them. So rather than thinking, I can't do any workouts this week, so I'm not going to do any at all. And things like making, a couple of meals each day that they know are within their protein and calorie targets, and then the 2 out of 3 for each day is better than doing none at all. So all these little extras are going to keep you moving on, not going backwards. But the whole all or nothing mentality is very much black and white thinking. So it's seeing yourself or others as absolute extremes. So it's really good or really bad, total success or complete failure. And there's no room for any kind of middle ground, which is really difficult when you're living in a life where it's never always going to be perfect. There's always going to be things that pop up. Maybe you get ill, maybe someone in the family gets ill, your kids, you get held on at work, all these situations, what else can happen? I've written some things down, but I can't actually think. But basically you kind of catastrophize everything. And if you don't have that ability to like bounce back, resilience, or think, okay, I can't do that today, but I'll do it tomorrow, and it's all like, oh my God, if I've not done it now, then it's never going to happen, can keep you really stuck and stagnant, and you kind of just panic about everything. And particularly if you have got a lot else going on in your lifestyle, the things which you maybe started to prioritize, for example, maybe you started to add in going to the gym or doing a little bit more movement, suddenly that's the first thing to go, because you can't fit that in, because you don't see it as a big enough priority. And I used an example last night where I was talking about, I had a little picture of someone who was in their bed, like a little cartoon thing, not actual person. And the little cartoon thing was like crying and like under their duvet. And I was like, this is what you feel like in the morning before you get up, when you realise all the stuff you've got to do. And all the stuff I, as your coach, have asked you to try and prioritise in this 8-week challenge that we're doing together. And, you can sit there and think about all the things that I've asked them to do. But not only that, but like work, having kids, walking the dog, being a carer, doing the housework, drinking enough water, having a social life, all those things. The thought, all that going around in your head, you just want to like curl up under your duvet and not get up again, and sort of just to stay there and hope everything goes away. But the reality is, the more we kind of dwell on it, the more we keep ourselves stuck. So I used the example of, in the morning you think, you've got so much to do, maybe you've snoozed your alarm and you leave it to the very last minute. So you've stayed in bed an extra half an hour. Instead of just getting up and doing something, you've stayed in bed an extra half an hour, which means now you're at the stage where you're in a rush, you've got no spare time to do anything, you're going to be rushing out the door, and all those things you have still to do, you've not done any of them anyway because you stayed in bed an extra half an hour. But the point I was trying to make was that this time is going to pass anyway. So those 30 minutes are going to pass anyway, and you can decide whether they pass doing something that's going to help you out a little bit, just a little something, or you do nothing at all. And the examples I used was, so can you like throw together a quick lunch, which means you've got something to take with you, so you don't have to go to the shops and buy something. Can you go out for a walk for 10 minutes around the block, so you've got some steps, some fresh air before you had to go to work? Can you give yourself a nice big glass of water, take it into the garden, or stand outside, get some fresh air, listen to the birds, look at the sky, have a bit of kind of like a mindful moment before the day gets going. And these are all tiny little things which are going to be really, really good for you. And the mentality of that something being better than nothing. So just doing a little bit, even when everything's really overwhelming. And it kind of eggs you on then to do a little bit more. And suddenly that overwhelm kind of starts to dissipate a little bit. So instead of thinking things like, I've only done 5,000 steps, I'm never going to get to 10,000, you can make a little self-compromise. Okay, I'm going to try and get to 7, do a little walk for bed, and that means that I'll finish on 7,000, and it's not a total failure, and it's a good middle ground. I'm happy with that. Or I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to skip out 2 exercises, or I'm going to drop down to 2 sets instead of 3, because I know going to the gym makes me feel better, and that's a good compromise rather than not going at all because you're stuck for time. There will still be time to do a little bit of something. Or I can't hit my full protein, so I'm going to take it a little bit under, but I know that's okay, and I'll aim for 100 rather than 130 grams. Or things like, I've got really busy social occasions coming up this week, so I'm going to be in bed late 3 times in the week, which means I'm going to be tired. So on the other 3 days in the week, I'm going to focus on getting to bed early so that I can catch up on some of that sleep. So you can't go to bed early every single night, but you can prioritize it a few nights. So it's that something better than nothing mentality, which takes away the overwhelm and actually gets you moving forward rather than being stuck and stagnating. And then I talked about things like the fixed versus growth mindset, and seeing little elements of you in each of those. And people who have a fixed mindset is very much all or nothing. You avoid challenges, you don't really like feedback, you're very focused on proving yourself all the time, you don't like failure or mistakes, you feel threatened by other people who are successful, and you shy away from unfamiliar things. Whereas if you've got more of a growth mindset, you see challenges as opportunities. You think about using feedback as constructive, how you can make things better, how you can be inspired by other people who are successful. Learn and grow from failures rather than, taking it so to heart and thinking like, oh, I'm rubbish at that, I'm just not going to do it at all. And that also comes with stepping outside of your comfort zone and sort of challenging yourself. And that's something definitely I noticed the women within Body Strong are doing. They are out of their comfort zone. Some of them haven't been to the gym before, some of them haven't ever lifted weights before. They're finally starting to think about what they're eating, what they're fueling themselves with. So, one of the ladies has talked about how empowered she feels already. We're only into week 3, because she's kind of taking back, not control of herself, but like, putting herself first and having that mindset that she is worthy of doing all this stuff for herself. So it's been really, really lovely. And you forget that even just small things that some people might take for granted because they do them quite regularly. If you do go to the gym, you do eat well already, then you don't see it as such a big deal. But for someone who's not been doing that, it's a huge bonus. And this growth mindset is super, super important. The other one which I just want to touch on is thinking about rest is lazy. And this is something which I think is really important, and it's like where I can kind of resonate with, because my whole journey into becoming a personal trainer and a coach stemmed from my journey as becoming a yoga teacher and partaking in yoga when I was at a real point of burnout in my life as a police officer. And the sort of connotations with rest and maybe taking a nap or going to bed early, it kind of brings up laziness or weakness. If you need to have a nap, well, you can't stay awake, what's wrong with you? There's also like a fear of missing out, and I touched on when I was working in the police and I was working night shifts. I would have really bad sleep, and then I would want to stay awake all day so that I could be involved with stuff that was going on, like doing daytime things with other people, not feeling like I was missing out on, going to classes or, like family occasions or things that were happening. And then not have enough sleep, but then have to go and do a full night shift and then wonder why I was absolutely exhausted, and eventually led to a bit of a burnout phase. And also people think that if they rest, they're taking 10 steps back. They're taking their foot off the gas. They're being a slacker. And all these kind of connotations. And what I likened it to was, if you ever played the Sims game, which was, I don't know if it was, I can't remember which computer game it was on, like console it was on, whether it was like an actual computer. But anyway, by the by, if you don't know what it is a game where basically you kind of created people and then had like built their house, put all their stuff in it, and then you had to like look after them. So they had needs and things, and they had these little bubbles that would come up if they were hungry or tired, or they wanted to like speak to someone else. So they're basically like human beings, and you were having to see to their needs as the computer game. But they also had this little green like diamond above their head, which was like healthy, and then that would go red if they were unhealthy or not doing very well. And that would often happen when like you hadn't let them go to the toilet, or you didn't give them any food, which is actually kind of weird and sadistic in a way. But anyway, that we are basically our own Sims, and we need to be able to listen and know when we have those different needs. So do we need to go for a sleep? Do we need to eat something properly? Do we need to spend time with other people? And these are all different elements of rest and nurturing, which is what the Embody Method is kind of built around. And it means that we can function. You can't really function properly if you allow yourself to get so exhausted and tired, and then you're going to be prone to illnesses, getting run down, etc. But what I wanted to touch on was the fact that rest doesn't just mean sleeping, doesn't just mean napping. There's loads of different kinds of rest that you can employ, and within the community we talk about these things like creative rest. So that could be doing things like drawing, painting, colouring in, maybe doing a crossword, maybe it's listening to a podcast, doing a Sudoku or something. So it's not rest necessarily, but you're turning off a bit of your brain, or not engaging that bit of the brain which has been focused on work or a certain topic, and you're allowing yourself to have a little creative moment. So maybe that comes naturally for you, so you don't find it as strenuous or you don't find it as arduous, you're just kind of doing it. And that's something I've been doing quite a lot of. Just got one of these colouring in books that's got all these kind of like stencil you just colour in. And that's quite relaxing. You don't need to really think about it apart from a little bit anal with the colours, and that's probably the only problem I have with that. But it's a really nice creative kind of rest. Other types of rest would be like passive rest, so maybe doing a little bit of gentle stretching, some yoga, maybe doing a bit of meditation, some breath work. Active rest could be going for a run, going for a swim. And again, you might think that's not really rest, but if it's giving your mind a rest by engaging the body slightly, then it is helpful for some people. And then a kind of blanket rest would be like a sensory rest. So you're taking away stimulation from things like your computer, your TV, your phone, noises like the radio, and maybe just putting yourself in a quiet room and just sitting and embracing that silence, and trying to take away that stimulation, because we do live in quite a stimulating world. There's always something on. Your TVs can be on 24 hours, the news is 24 hours, the radio's always on. So sometimes that can be a good way to switch off, particularly if, the news and stuff at the moment is very, very dark and depressing and hard to kind of listen to all the time. So if it can give you that little rest, then it's a good option to use. But the sleep element is obviously very important, because sleep is recovery. Sleep is when the body repairs itself, regenerates itself. And if we're not doing that, or we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to do that, we can't burn the candle at both ends, because eventually something is got to give, and it will be your health. And then I use another analogy here, which I think is quite good, and it's like a car analogy. So if you think about yourself as a car, if you have a car and every single warning light is flashing, the oil light's on, the brake pad light's on, everything's falling apart and it's just flashing at you. The petrol gauge is right down at the red as well. You've got like 2 miles left. Eventually that car is going to come to a shuddering stop, or maybe, blow up or something, because it's in such poor condition. That is like you. You are the car that if you allow yourself to become so run down, not listening to those warning signals that are being flashed at you in your head, maybe your body, maybe things are showing up, like poor digestion, bad sleep, maybe you get spotty skin, loads of different things can happen, headaches, etc. Then eventually you're going to stop too. Whereas if you think about yourself as a car, maybe it's a new car, you're going to fuel it properly, you're going to make sure it gets MOT'd, it's going to get serviced, you're going to top up things like tires, various different analogies to do with cars, and you're just kind of looking after yourself as you go. And that is what you should do about your body. And I talked about this in the group, and I think it kind of, going back to what I was saying at the start about that maintenance, you are always going to have a level of maintenance with yourself. Whether that's things like, getting a massage every so often, people get their nails done, get your hair done. It's all a level of maintenance in ourselves. And the same thing is there when it comes to exercise and nutrition and rest. We're always going to have to keep ourselves topped up, because it's not like a one and done thing. And coming back into that whole expectation versus reality, once we realize that we need to be aware of ourselves requiring that little bit of service history and kind of just a little investment in ourselves, then it takes less pressure off. We're very quick not to want to spend money on ourselves, but when you don't do it for so long, eventually it will come to catch you. Like, when you've ignored all those lights in your car flashing, suddenly you need a lot more work done than had you just got the first one fixed in the first place. So the key for this one, the rest being lazy, is listen to what your body's saying. What is it telling you? What does it need? If it needs a nap, take a nap. Does it need a lie in? Do you need to go to bed earlier? Because your body is, once you get in tune with your body and connect to it, it knows what's best for you. But we're so good at kind of ignoring things until the very last minute when it's a little bit too late. And you need to think more about future-proofing yourself. And that's certainly something that I encourage my clients to continue doing. And that's a mindset shift that they were talking about, like, I'm just wondering how I'm going to maintain this, how am I going to keep going? And that's why Body Strong is so good, because we're using the 8 weeks to build that foundation, like I said at the start, the foundation that they can then continue working on. building layers, putting extension on, whatever else, an attic, and helping themselves go forward. So maybe you need to make a mindset shift. Maybe some of these resonated with you. I'd love to hear if you had any comments. And if you're interested in joining the next Embody Strong, it's going to be opening in July, so you can join the priority list, so you're first on the list to find out more. And this is the sort of stuff we talk about. So we meet up weekly, we have different topics of conversation, and we chat about them. And it's like real life situations. Everyone's going through different things, and can employ these in different ways and how it means to them. But it's super, super important stuff. So hopefully you enjoyed that podcast episode, and I will be back with another podcast episode very soon.